Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a few moments. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day. Welcome to Advocacy Anywhere, powered by AJC. Advocacy Anywhere is AJC's digital platform that will enable you to engage with AJC's global expertise, content, and advocacy from wherever you are. Today's program is brought to you in partnership with Jewish Insider. You can sign up for Jewish Insider's daily kickoff by visiting www.jewishinsider.com. Germany has been an outlier in Europe with a particularly low mortality rate from COVID-19. As a central player in the transatlantic relationship, a key ally of Israel, and an economic powerhouse, Germany plays a critical role on the global stage. Today, Germany announced a ban on all Hezbollah activities on German soil, joining a growing list of nations taking decisive actions against the terrorist entity, which makes today's conversation that much more timely. To discuss these issues, we are honored to be joined today by Her Excellency Emily Haber, German Ambassador to the United States. Not only is Ambassador Haber the German ambassador to the US, which obviously says a great deal about her diplomatic stature, but not less importantly to us at AJC, she's a longtime and dear friend. Ambassador Haber will be in conversation with AJC CEO David Harris. After we hear from the ambassador and David, we'll take your questions. You may email your questions to questions@ajc.org, questions is plural, or use the Q&A chat feature in Zoom. David, you have the floor.
Belle, thank you very much, and hello to everyone. I must say that when I get together with Emily Haber, normally we begin by talking about our sons and our grandchildren, but I'm going to save the audience that conversation today. We're very lucky to have Emily Haber, especially as Belle said today. It's completely coincidental, but as you heard, Germany announced a ban on all Hezbollah activity earlier today. It so happens that Emily Haber is not only the German ambassador to the United States, but before coming here, for several years served as the state secretary in the Ministry of Interior, which actually made the decision. So Emily, before we get to other topics, including of course, COVID-19, could I ask you, what was your reaction when you heard the news from Germany about the Hezbollah decision?
Well, my former colleagues in the Interior Ministry knew how important this decision was going to be for me, and I had been in constant contact over the past months with them. So when I got up this morning, the first thing I saw in my email was the information, the heads up, right minutes before the ban was disclosed, saying, here it comes. So it was a big decision. These bans always take a lot of time because it's so important that once you actually issue a ban, that it will stand up in court. In our previous bans, we've made the experience that individuals will come forward and will take the issue to court. And the impact of this ban will depend on the court holding it up. Imagine what the reaction would be. We issue a ban, it does not stand in court, and how would other European countries look towards it? So these bans sometimes take time. They need to be watertight. We've never lost in court, and I'm sure we won't in this case either, should anyone take it to court. This explains why some things don't happen overnight, but need assiduous and detailed planning beforehand.
As an organization that has been focused on this issue for many years, as you know, AJC welcomed this really courageous and principled act. And we want you to know, as the German ambassador to the United States, how much we appreciate this and how much we hope that other EU member states will follow the example established by Germany today. So let me, if I may, then transition to COVID-19, which is the immediate challenge for us all. The impression from outside Germany is that Germany has dealt with it quite responsibly. The fatality rate has been a bit lower than other countries, though the rate of infection has been quite high. What can you tell us about the current state in Germany today And what, if anything, distinguishes Germany's response from the response of other countries?
Well, all in all, our response has been pretty much the response that has been given here. That is, we insist on social distancing, we do quarantining, we do testing, intensive contact tracing, we insist on social hygiene, and so forth. Also, I don't consider Germany an outlier because, as you pointed out, our numbers are quite high. We are about at 159,000 infections, and that makes us one of the countries in the world that are most affected by the pandemic. What made our case specific, we had a head start in several aspects. You see, there was a German scientist that had done research on the coronavirus even before the WHO had concluded that this was an illness that could be transmitted from human to human. So in the minute when the WHO had concluded that we had a test in place that was quickly recognized by the WHO and then mass produced. So that gave us a head start in testing. What we also did very early on was, seeing that this pandemic was going to come, we hugely increased our hospital capacities. We nearly doubled the intensive care units. We nearly doubled the respiratory systems that go along with these intensive care units. Our healthcare system is a pretty well-oiled machinery. It's federal. Our system is federal, so decisions can be taken in a decentralized context, and it doesn't take long. So that helped too. And what also helped was that we had a pandemic strategy in place, which means that a lot of procedures and processes and decisions were already determined beforehand. We had no discussion on who was going to pay for the testing because it was all there in the pandemic for everyone to follow through. So all of that helped. Then we were lucky in that in the early phases of the crisis, it was very young people. I shouldn't be saying lucky, but young people got infected, young people who had been on skiing holidays or in carnivals. And that explained the very low mortality rate in the beginning. Of course, that changed. We are now at over 6,000 people dead. But the combination of preparing the healthcare units, having a pandemic strategy in place, doing intensive testing and contact tracing. We tested people who we knew had been in contact with people that were infected. We didn't only test people who came with symptoms. So that allowed us to trace actually the journey, if you like, of the illness. So that's where we are right now.
So I'm looking over what is your right shoulder, I believe, and I see the EU flag. In the early days of the crisis, there seemed to be quite a bit of tension within the EU, particularly from Italy, which was one of the first and hardest hit countries in all of Europe, and concerns that a kind of nationalism had replaced a European integration process. It was really every country for themselves. Do you feel that today the bonds of the EU are as strong as they were, perhaps even stronger, or have they weakened?
You're completely right in saying that in the first moments, in the first weeks of the crisis, I should say until perhaps mid-March, it was a very inward-looking approach that European countries, and mine included, pursued. It was everyone was fending for himself. At one stage, I had compared that to the situation in the airplane, where you first take the mask on yourself and then you help others. But it wasn't a glorious moment, frankly, and I'm not proud of it. We quickly, however, realized that such everyone on its own policy would come with a huge price. The price being not only a political one and a security one, it would be a European one, because after all, the European Union, as you pointed out, is rooted in solidarity. But it would also come with, an ethical and moral price, because after all, democracies, in democracies, you cannot look away if there's human suffering. Sometimes we do, it's true, but the normative cloud of democracies depends on what we think is human values. So it was hugely important to change course. And really we have. I find it amazing, not only we have, other European countries have as well. France has, Czech Republic, everyone who could actually change tack. And I find it amazing that the narrative is still the narrative of the early days. I actually do believe that some people have an interest in keeping that narrative out there because it's so divisive. But in the meantime, we're taking in patients from France, we're taking in patients from Italy, we're sending medical teams to other countries, we're sending medicine, respiratory systems to other countries. We have supported one another in the huge repatriation efforts in the course of the crisis, and we've set up huge economic relief programs and are in the course of debating yet another relief package these days. So we are in a completely different chapter. Perhaps the narratives are still lagging, but solidarity is certainly in place.
You mentioned repatriation of citizens. I just want to add for our audience that Germany was also very helpful to Israel in repatriating a number of its citizens abroad through Lufthansa planes and others. So I just want to give a shout out, Emily. But in the foreign policy world, which is a world you've lived in for several decades, there's already a very sort of intense discussion about what are the enduring geopolitical lessons of this period. I mean, one day, hopefully we'll have a vaccination, we'll look in the rear view mirror, and the pandemic will be there, not in front of us. But do you see shifts on the global stage, shifts in power, shifts in relationships that have caught your attention, either as opportunities or potentially as threats?
I think that's a very astute question. It's difficult to say already now because it's early days. It's like the situation at the sea when the water hasn't receded and you cannot yet see the patterns in the sand. I'd compare it with that. So yes, it's early days. But there's one thing you can actually note, and the narratives I spoke about before are perhaps a testimony to that. I do see countries that see the crisis as an opening. I think that certainly China sees the crisis as an opening, but so does Russia, an opening that will help them or may help them shift the geopolitical balance. Why do I say that? Well, look at the statements that come from China. Look at the narratives that China is pushing. Look at even the exercise of soft power, which in itself is not a bad thing, but it's a soft power that, of course, is designed to deepen divisions and to deepen divisiveness. All of that is not new. It's been previous objectives, both by China and Russia, to weaken the cohesion of the West, to weaken and undermine and fragment the European Union, because it will in turn reinforce or strengthen Chinese and Russian asymmetric power. So we should be worried about that. I'm quite certain that both countries are using the crisis as an engine to propel deep dividing lines among us. And I do wonder actually to what extent they're going to use the divisions that we have among ourselves. All countries have differences among ourselves. Whether these do not turn out to be tools and pawns in their shift their claim for geopolitical shifts. Think about it this way: we are partners in an alliance, transatlantic alliance. We are partners within the European Union. That's something that China does not have. They don't have allies or alliances the way we do, and nor does Russia. And it's always been, not stated perhaps, but an implicit objective and very clearly readable by both countries to take this competitive edge that we have in our alliances from us. That's something that could happen. But if both China and Russia are able to use the crisis as an engine for division, we could also use it as an engine for actually addressing differences that we might have, and which usually have very rational causes and are manageable. So that's a huge responsibility that confronts us. And I do hope that all of us use the opportunity in these difficult months and perhaps more to come to use the crisis as an engine to foster cohesion and unity and sense of purpose.
So if we can stay on this subject, thank you for being so thought-provoking. The strength of the European Union is in its numbers, in its cohesion, in its global economic and other power. The weakness of the European Union is that decision-making is based on consensus. Is there a consensus, do you believe, with respect to policy toward both Russia and China today? I'm going beyond Crimean annexation. You spoke about the attempts of both Beijing and Moscow to sow division within Europe, to weaken Europe from within. How responsive are Europeans to those messages from China and Russia today?
Well, I'd say there were differences or nuances in the pre-crisis days, and there are differences and nuances that are impacted by the crisis. Here again, we're standing on the sand and the water hasn't receded. The observation is in place that in the early phases of the crisis, swift Chinese deliveries and a very effective narrative and public diplomacy about it have gained China, how shall I call it, a soft power stature that it didn't have before. It was conveniently forgotten that we had supported China in the early days of its pandemic in Wuhan as well. But over time, people have also realized that some deliveries were not what they were expected to be. They have seen the intention of the narratives. They have probably carefully read Chinese statements and actions that were designed to blatantly state the link between dependence, reliance, the size of the Chinese market, and policy statements in countries. So all of that is going to congeal at some stage. I'm sure it's going to not eclipse, but it's going to supersede earlier perceptions. I think what we need to be is very clear-eyed and very outspoken on what actually happens, on the intention of it, on the potential consequences of it. Yeah, always.
So to continue, Emily, for a moment, are China and Russia also seeing an opportunity because of what they believe is a certain weakness in the transatlantic partnership?
Yes.
Now, you and I remember when you first arrived in Washington in 2018, I think our very first conversation in your office was largely about how to strengthen the transatlantic partnership on both sides of the ocean. How would you assess the strength and the resilience of that transatlantic partnership today, not just in response to the pandemic, but in response to the potential geopolitical shifts you're talking about?
I think I said to you at the time, yeah, we have a number of differences. Most of them are actually not entirely new, but have been debated with previous German governments and previous administrations as well. There are reasons for the differences, and we have a lot of experiences on both sides of the Atlantic to actually address them or manage them or solve them. So differences in itself, that's not a bad thing, that's normal, because nations will have different interests at times, even allies. What worried me more was that I was wondering whether we don't start to see the world through different lenses. And what I mean by that is our the way we view multilateral institutions and international rules and regulations. Now you see, a country like mine, a medium-sized country within the European Union, very globalized, we depend on international rules and regulations and the transparency and the predictability that only they can provide. A country like the United States may decide otherwise because you're the single most powerful country in the world, and you can, if you decide, rely on self-reliance. We can't. So that may be a difference. I would contend that in the long run, every country, even the relatively most powerful, will profit from the predictability of rules and institutions, even if they're flawed. But I accept the argument that your reliance on that can be less. So that was a difference, and I wasn't quite certain how this would be evolving in the long run. Now, the coronavirus opens a new chapter. The differences that I mentioned before, what I mean by that is differences on tariffs, on trade, on deficits, on burden sharing.
On NATO, exactly, yeah. And
so forth. They have taken to the backstage for the moment because everything is so much focused on the crisis, on handling the crisis. They'll not have gone away. And I would return to the point I've made previously. If China and Russia have decided that our differences are policy tools in order to widen gulfs between allies and in alliances, then it should be of our overwhelming interest in addressing these differences, in managing them, and in securing immunity, if I may use this metaphor, providing immunity against any such policy strategies. It has become even more important now than it was before.
Emily, thank you. I want to shift gears slightly, although not dramatically. A week from tomorrow is May 8th, 2020, which marks exactly 75 years to the day of Germany's surrender and the end of the Second World War, the end of the Holocaust in Europe. As the German ambassador to the United States, what thoughts do you have that you could share with our audience a week in anticipation of this really milestone anniversary?
When you first came to visit me, when I took over the job as ambassador in Washington, you told me that the decision had been taken to have the AJC World Forum in Berlin in this very year of the 75th anniversary. And you know, I don't know whether you noticed it, but it really overwhelmed me at the time, because I felt—
In a positive way or negative way? I want to be.
Oh, come on, in a positive
No, for the audience, I know, but I want to show the audience knows.
It was.
They were not there.
let me tell you, you know, when the president was in Israel for the anniversary of the liberation
your president, Steinmeier.
My president, yes, Steinmeier, for the liberation of the concentration camp of Auschwitz. He gave a speech. I thought the speech was very moving, and he said something that I somehow also felt when you told me the forum was going to take place in Berlin, he said that he was, now let me find the exact way, he more or less said he was weighed down with the burden of historical guilt as German and as highest representative of my country, of Germany, on this occasion. But he also felt an immense gratitude that survivors had stretched out the hand to us. And what he meant, I think, was that this moment was about remembrance of the end of the darkest time of history. But it was also, when he stood there and spoke, it was a moment that said something about the future, and about a future where we are sat side by side. And that's what I felt.
Well, for the audience that doesn't know, unfortunately, we had to cancel the AJC Global Forum in Berlin because of the pandemic, because we can't even get on the street, much less to the airport, much less gather in the thousands in Berlin. But our intent was indeed to mark the 75th anniversary in Berlin as the first Jewish organization to engage with Germany after the Second World War, as you know, Emily. But let me ask you this then. The two issues for the Jewish community that emanate from the Second World War and continue to be very high on our radar screen, of course, are Israel, born 3 years later, reborn, and the special relationship between Germany and Israel that was established beginning with Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. Is that special relationship as strong and resilient today as it was when it was first established? Is this a responsibility that newer generations of Germans also see to their country? Or is there a growing desire for a kind of normalization of Germany and German foreign policy?
There can't be a normalization. The German relationship with Israel is unique. It's unique because the memory of the Holocaust and is a pillar of the relationship. And that's a pillar that will not be eclipsed or will fade away, because it is, our relationship is colored by what has been, as much as it has been when the relationship was first established in the 1950s. And what has been is relevant how we move, how we develop not only our bilateral relationship, but how we act hand in glove in future. So what you mentioned cannot happen. I think there's a deep feeling and a deep sense ingrained in my country that the responsibility for the Holocaust and what this means, how we go forward jointly, that's interlinked, that's intrinsically interlinked. So my answer to you is, I think the relationship, if anything, has grown stronger. You will remember also that the Chancellor, when in Israel in 2012, I believe, she said this by using the words, it's our Staatsräson, by which she means it's part of the identity of the German state.
And it's true. I mean, for AJC, we observe the relationship, and it is an extraordinarily strong relationship. I don't think people can fully appreciate either the breadth or the depth of a bilateral relationship. Are there occasional differences? There are, but that's even the case among the closest of friends. My last question, Emily, before we turn it over to the audience, is the other side of the Holocaust legacy, and that is the issue of anti-Semitism. There has been a concern throughout the world, including in Europe, including in Germany, that there has in recent years been an increase in anti-Semitism for many reasons. Social media, a sense that the taboo on anti-Semitism is kind of vanishing as time moves on. People forget, people don't care. New immigrant communities arrive in Europe that don't have or share that history and the inhibitions, the prohibitions. How concerned are you about the increase in anti-Semitism in Germany today and the threats to Jews from the multiple sources of anti-Semitism in our world now?
We've seen an increase last year, as we've seen an increase in the year before. We're looking more closely now, and the metrics we use, our security authorities use, are more precise and more designed to identify the specific sources or motivations of anti-Semitism. So I would say that our capacity and our determination to precisely look and not look away is certainly an important factor in order to be able to combat it. Second, there's zero tolerance. We've seen terrible attacks in Germany, one in particular in Halle last year, on Yom Kippur, on the highest holiday, where a synagogue was attacked by a right-wing terrorist. There is firm determination to combat that, to go after it, and to contribute at the same time and be heavily involved in all efforts designed to keep up the memory, to support remembrance, Holocaust education, to prevent distortion. Actually, Germany in this year, since March, has taken over the chair of the International Holocaust Remembrance, is it called organization?
No, Alliance, IHRA, IHRA.
And that is also an indication how important we feel this issue is in our day. Because you rightly say, the communication environment and the sources of anti-Semitism have multiplied over the next years, and we need to adapt strategies. In Germany, in particular, where we've seen a large migration over the past years, we need to ensure that our sense of history and our sense of historical responsibility is something that is part of the collective awareness. It's part of our society, and you cannot choose and pick. You cannot turn your back to that history, even if you come from someplace else, because it's part of the society and part of our identity.
No. Bell, just before handing it over, I just wanted to comment that Interior Minister Seehofer, who made the announcement about Hezbollah, in addition to speaking about the terrorist nature of Hezbollah and the criminal nature of Hezbollah, spoke very specifically about the anti-Semitic nature of Hezbollah. And it's our hope, Emily, that when Germany takes the presidency of the European Union, that it will indeed make this issue of Hezbollah, its terrorist, criminal, and anti-Semitic nature, part and parcel of its agenda with its EU colleagues. And with that, if I may, Bell, let's turn to the audience, please.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Ambassador. Just a reminder, viewers, you can email your questions to questions@ajc.org, questions in plural is plural, or use the Q&A chat feature in Zoom. So to start off, Ambassador, first, you have a lot of words of thanks from our viewers regarding the Hezbollah decision and for your relationship with AJC and support in general. First, on the Hezbollah issue, I'm going to combine a couple of questions. AJC Honorary President John Shapiro is asking, what are the chances, in your opinion, that any of other European nations will follow Germany's leadership on Hezbollah and make similar decisions regarding the terrorist entity? And Melanie Nelkin, an AJC Executive Council member in Atlanta, is wondering if you could talk about the degree to which Germans view Hezbollah as a threat in general. Does this decision reflect public opinion of Hezbollah in Germany?
To your first question, I was asked that by a colleague from the State Department too today, and I will tell you what I said to him as well. So this is still early days. If Germany takes a decision, of course, it will be carefully registered across Europe. It will be part of the discussion, the discussions that then will be held. But to what extent it will impact on the decision, on decisions that may be taken elsewhere, we shall have to see. On the terrorist nature of Hezbollah, I believe that Interior Minister Seehofer was very clear-eyed and very outspoken about it. He said this was an organization that denied the right of existence to Israel, that was profoundly, as David has pointed out, anti-Semitic, that it pursued its objectives by dint of terrorism. So I think in such a matter, I don't know whether a general public has an intense knowledge of Hezbollah, and I think in these cases it's the responsibility of political leaders to guide and to explain, and to do that as clearly and as directly and as transparent as possible. And this, I believe, has been done.
Thank you, Ambassador. Zoe in Berlin, actually, who's staying up late, I guess, to watch this conversation, is wondering, how concerned are you about the rise of nationalism across Europe? Hungary has given recently extraordinary powers to the executive branch in response to the coronavirus, and there have been rumblings in other countries as well, in Europe and elsewhere. Will the forces of liberal democracy prevail against this trend?
That's a very important question. I believe, you see, I'm not criticizing that in Corona times, democracies take decisions that they would normally not take. Because this specific crisis did actually necessitate decisions and steps that curbed individual liberties. If you are quarantined at home, if you are not allowed to go to parks, if you close down your business, well, that's all curbing liberties. That's one thing. It's an entirely different matter if these decisions, if decisions at all that curb liberties are without time limits, if they are taken indefinitely. And here I must say, our normative clouds as democracies depends, and as an alliance by that for that matter as well, and of the European Union as well, depends on our respect for human rights and values and principles. If we see an erosion of either of these aspects, I think this will be carefully read by actors, non-democratic actors. It will give license to authoritarian regimes. It will lessen our attractiveness. It will lessen our credibility. So something very, very big is at stake if we turn away from this insight.
Thank you, Ambassador. Vivian in New Jersey says, you spoke beautifully about Germany's special responsibility towards Israel. What do you see as the next frontier in German-Israeli relations?
What do you mean by next frontier? May I ask that? You mean the next step? What was, you see, it is, let me say this. When I was in the Interior Ministry, I observed something that I hadn't realized before going there. And that was, security-wise, we work with Israel intensely closely. Much more than I had expected before. I traveled to Israel quite often just to exchange views and insights and knowledge about what's happening in the realm of security. I'm saying that this because I don't think there's much knowledge out there that how intense, how close our relationship actually is. So next frontier sounds as if we need to go a long way to move forward. Actually, we are working on a very solid and large base.
Thank you, Ambassador. David Chaffetz, an AJC Board of Governors member in Sarasota, says that a very time-sensitive issue will be before the UN Security Council in the fall regarding the end of UN arms embargo on Iran. Will Germany join the US in supporting the continuation of the embargo, including the use of snapback sanctions?
We're in favor of that. Speaking about the arms embargo.
Correct.
We are in favor of taking steps that would prolong the arms embargo. We feel that this is important for the stability.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ted in Cincinnati asks, David Harris mentioned Germany's upcoming presidency in the European Union. Can you comment on Germany's priorities looking towards this presidency and what we should expect during that time?
We took a long time to prepare for this presidencies and had a whole set of priorities and objectives and focus in place. But alas, the coronavirus has appended all the planning. So we are in the course of redefining what our presidency will be about. Obviously, fighting the coronavirus, joining forces in fighting the coronavirus will be huge. Economic recovery and the future budget will be additional focuses that will keep us very busy during the presidency and that will continue to loom large. There will be climate change as a huge topic. The Chancellor has said a couple of days ago that we actually should use the crisis in order to double down on our climate change goals, reducing our dependence and reliance on fossil fuels even more than we had previously expected. Yet another focus will be on innovation and the development of technologies, and in some aspects also more independence in some technological areas, because we've seen to what extent reliances have made us dependent in the coronavirus and have hampered our capacity to act very quickly. So you can see there's a lot on our plate during our presidency.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ben in New York writes, you spoke about the transatlantic relationship, and it would seem that both pre and during coronavirus climate, the transatlantic partnership is facing difficulties. To the extent that you can comment on this, what would you say is the biggest challenge, both challenge and opportunity, in the German-American relationship at this time?
What's the biggest challenge? I think the biggest challenge is to focus on what unites us and not where we have differences. I think we are going through a time when we need to firmly re-establish the sense of unity and the sense of purpose that unites us. All the issues, the different burden sharing and trade and differences on what you see, most of them were actually not strategic. There were mostly differences on how to proceed, and I feel that we have placed too much focus on the differences and not on the unity. It's like a luxury, actually, in these times of geopolitical challenges, that we do not that we focus on what we feel is a difference, that we don't focus on how to manage and enhance unity. I think we need a change of focus there.
Bill, if I could step in and ask Emily, because in our early conversations, Emily, you wanted to get beyond Washington as well, to visit other cities, to visit universities, to meet young people. After 2 years, nearly 2 years, is your sense that interest in the transatlantic partnership in the United States outside of Washington, is it alive? Is it increasing? Is it diminishing? What's your experience after 2 years?
I think it is changing, that's true. And that's not so astonishing either. After all, you see the generation of those who were instrumental in creating a very close transatlantic relationship is growing older. We used to have, all in all, around about 17 million GIs who had served or done a tour of service in Germany. It's 35,000 right now. So the numbers are declining, and that also means that fewer and fewer people who know why we need a transatlantic relationship, who've experienced the post-war era and the Soviet threat, who've lived in Germany or elsewhere in Europe and brought back their experiences. We see a change of generation who rightly believes that the challenges and the threats and the risks do not emanate from Europe, they emanate from other regions of the world where the focus should be. So we have to tackle with that, but never forgetting that the way we're seen by political challengers, if I may call them that, or even by adversaries, the way we're seen is through the prism how close we are. Because once I read the United States had all in all 67, I think it was, 67 allies, treaties with allies, alliances, and so forth. Well, China doesn't have that. And Russia doesn't have that. Isn't that a huge leveraging power at a time when the balance of the world is not tilting to the West, but tilting in favor of China?
Mm-hmm. Bill?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Ambassador. Juliet, also in Cincinnati, is asking, Germany has dealt, excuse me, I'm sorry, that's the wrong question. Okay, here we go. Germany has dealt so honestly and compellingly with her own history. And as you know, the Jewish community remains concerned about other nations who have either denied its history during World War II or are less inclined to confront their histories during that dark period. Does Germany have a role to play in working with these other countries to confront their histories?
Yes and no. I don't, you see, it's true that all countries need to confront their own history, bad and good. But I don't quite believe that Germany's voice, if we tell other countries how to confront their own history, will really be heard. So what we should be doing is confronting our own history, working together with allies and partners in making that an important principle, but not being patronizing with other countries how to deal with their own history. I think that's not, I think that's part of the community. It's not part of the community of nations. It's not the role that Germany exclusively can play.
Thank you, Ambassador. We're going to take one more question, and then David, I'm going to kick it back to you. Joe in Washington is asking, America is increasingly divided politically, culturally, and economically. And Germany is a country that knows a lot about integration and has experienced it quite recently and relevantly in the past. Knowing that the context and acknowledging that the context is different, would you have lessons about bringing people together who feel very far apart?
I expect the question is alluding to recent immigration into Germany. I'd say we can explain what worked in Germany and what did not work in Germany. And we can analyze and that dispassionately and explain the reasons. But what we have been going through and what we have done is not necessarily a template for others. Conditions are different, political, geographic, demographic conditions are not really comparable. So I'm not so much in favor of making German policies a template for others.
So I think everyone now understands why we attach so much importance to our relationship with Germany, and in particular to its ambassador, Emily Haber. In 1949, AJC became the first Jewish organization in the world to engage with post-war Germany. It was not a simple decision to make. It was not an uncontroversial decision to make. We were criticized and attacked by many. But we understood, that is our predecessors understood, that Germany was simply too big, too important, and too consequential to ignore. It would reemerge. And the question is, how would it reemerge? Responsibly or irresponsibly? Peacefully or aggressively? We had a stake in the outcome of that debate. And we knew the price that had been paid for neglect of those questions in the past. So we took a chance. And here we are now, 71 years later, and you've heard the ambassador of Germany speaking as the representative of a fiercely democratic country that has helped drive integration in Europe, integration as a peace mechanism more than anything else, describe a special relationship with Israel which few people can fully understand or imagine, and who now represents a country whose Jewish population has dramatically increased in the last 30 years. Not a perfect country. We have our issues, we have our differences, we have our concerns about anti-Semitism. We've had our debates on Iran policy, and sometimes on votes at the UN, but they're all driven by the same commitment to the relationship and appreciation for what Germany has achieved in these last 71 years against the backdrop of history. So I hope all of you watching this will see this conversation in that larger framework. And by that comparison, on May 8th, 8 days from today, please think back to this conversation and how far we've traveled from the darkest days in human history until today. So with that, Emily, I thank you. And Belle, I know you have a closing word.
Thank you, David, and thank you again, Ambassador. I also want to thank our audience for joining us today. To support AJC's vital work around the world, please visit ajc.org/donate. And to stay up to date on upcoming Advocacy Anywhere programs, please visit ajc.org/Advocacy Anywhere. Two quick highlights. Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we'll be joined by Natan Sharansky, former Refusnik, Deputy Prime Minister of Israel, Chairman of the Jewish Agency, and a true hero of the Jewish people, for a conversation on his personal story, the importance of Israel, and more. And tomorrow, join us for a session on AJC diplomacy and the Arab world, also at 12 p.m. Eastern. To register for these programs, again, please visit ajc.org/Advocacy Anywhere. Please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.